Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Schein, a.k.a. You're tuned in to wildpodcast.me. And today we have a special guest. We have Dr. David Schein. How you doing, sir?
I am doing fine, just working hard and trying to stay out of trouble.
Absolutely, absolutely. So today we're going to talk about your book, Bad Deal for America. So before we get started with that, what was the energy and the impact for you to write that particular book?
Well, it's part of a series of books that I'm working on, and the idea is that the United States government is under the Constitution is a fantastic situation and certainly a work in progress. Certainly a lot of things that aren't perfect about it, but hey, anything human's not perfect, right?
Right.
So I wanted to present to people an objective as I can be. Of course, I'm a human and I have my own uh, opinions, but to explain to people how the United States Congress, which is a very important organization, we have the House of Representatives and the Senate, is not serving the American people. It's serving the people who are there, who work very hard to stay there, but that they've lost contact with people like you and me.
Right. Right. So how long did it take you to put this book together?
Well, I want to give credit to my researchers. As a college professor, I'm very fortunate to have access to people who are looking for work, paid hourly work. We pay everybody who works with us. We don't try and take advantage of them or call them as student training or anything like that. So it's a part-time job for them. But I have been fortunate to have a very nice handful of people that worked on my first book, and then a different handful of people who worked on my second book. And what I said is, let's all get together and find interesting quotations from 26 Republicans and 26 Democrats who have either served in the Senate or the House of Representatives, or in many cases both, like Joe Biden. Sometimes people ask me why Joe Biden's in the book, but Donald Trump is not in the book. But as you know, rather famously, Donald Trump never held a political office before he became president. So he wasn't eligible for the book. But we weren't looking to show people in a positive light. I've got to be fair about this. We were looking for things that were stupid, weird, prejudicial, and unfortunately, it was really easy to find stuff,
Right.
and we came up actually with about 100 candidates. And the separate thing was to work. A Bad Deal for America is based on a deck of cards. So, of course, a deck of cards has 52 cards in four suites plus a joker. And so that became the format for the book. So we tried to pick the 26 comments or sets of comments by various Democrats and Republicans in each party. But the idea was to be funny, to people would laugh at parts of the book, but also to think about how the book presents these folks who are being well compensated. So that was, it took about 2 years to put the book together. But again, without the great help of my student researchers, it would probably have taken 3 or 4 years. And one of the things I do, however, is everything that appears in my books I do. I write every word and I get great help from these people, but they find things and bring them to me. And one of the things we do is we double check everything. We didn't want anybody in the book to come back later and say, Dr. Schein, hey, you misquoted me, you made me look bad, and all that. And I can tell you the book's been out for about 2.5 years now. And we have not had a single politician in that book come over to us and say, you were unfair to us. You didn't tell you didn't quote me fairly. So I think we did a pretty good job, at least best we can tell. And for politicians who didn't make the top 53, 52 plus the Joker. We had a special section we put in called chips, as in, poker chips.
Right.
And these were politicians who were kind of the honorable mention, where we found some interesting quotes, but not enough to give them their own playing card.
Got you. Got you. So, in today's political climate, what seems to be something that frustrates you, or that you know can be fixed?
Well, I did have an opportunity. A lot of us talk about, gee, if I could only be a fly on the wall in the White House or someplace or that place. And I had a unique opportunity in 1999, 2000. I had a friend of mine who was a senior staffer for Congressman Archer, and Congressman Archer had become the chairman of Ways and Means from 1995 to 2000 when he retired. And so I had the opportunity for that couple year period to go to a number of events in Washington, D.C., to have almost open access to the halls of Congress, the office suite, not out on the floor, but actually go to people's offices and to chat with people and to listen to what was happening. Congressman Archer could not go to everything that he was offered. So my friend had tickets to a Jerry Jeff Walker concert that a lobbyist sponsored a bunch of tickets. And so we got to go there. We got to hang out with the lobbyist and be the surrogates for this member of Congress. So it was a very interesting time period, but it helped me to see very clearly what was happening up there. And I wanted people to understand that while members of Congress will complain and say, "Hey, we're only making 200,000 a year. This is not enough money to live in Washington D.C. and keep a home in our districts all over the United States." The reality is that the best we could tell, and this took a lot of digging to find out, this was some of the heavy research for the book, is the first part of the book we talk about what resources and compensation that these members of the House and the Senate receive. And it's from $500,000 to $1 million a year, not counting the salaries that they pay to their staff. So it's plenty of money. But more importantly, as you and I are talking on an electronic full video system today, StreamYard, is that with Teams, Zoom, StreamYard, there's a lot of ways that people can communicate without physically being in the same room. And so my proposal for the next century, as we pass the 250 year mark for the United States, is that we require our members of Congress to live in their home district, not in Washington, D.C. And I don't mind if they go to Washington periodically, but I think we need people where you and I as citizens can go and knock on their door and say, "Hey, let's you and me talk a little bit about what's happening about my cost of living, the fact that while I may own a house, my kids are going to have trouble buying a house, or my grandkids are going to be burdened with this massive national debt. What are you doing for us?" So that was, the big driving force behind the book.
Gotcha. Gotcha. You have another book that you came out with in 2018, The Decline of America: 100 Years of Leadership Failures. Interesting. What was the take behind that one?
Well, that was the first in the series, and that's on the United States presidency. And the basic premise behind the book is that the United States has been successful because of its citizens, not because of its leadership, sadly. And as a college professor, I gave letter grades, and the highest letter grade was to, of all people, Harry Truman, who, of course, served after FDR from the middle of 40s to the early 1950s. And a lot of people said I was a hard grader, but this is a very important position in the world, not just in the United States. So I picked the period, what I call the American enterprise period, the American period in the world, starting basically with the end of World War One, when we became recognized as the world power, replacing at that point Britain, and of course taking out rivals like Germany and Japan that of course attacked the rest of the civilized world. But the two driving factors for writing that book were, number one, the national debt, which of course is more than $10 trillion higher than it was when we released the book in 2018. And also something that is more politically sensitive, and that is the what I call the deification or the worship of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, who, in my opinion, and again, that's my opinion as a professor and observer of America, got America started on this big government push that we're still in. And neither political party has really dealt with that. But the national debt is reaching crisis proportions. So the book may not have had as much impact in 2018, but I'm hoping people go back and read it today and say, oh my goodness, Schein was really on something here, because we are now really crippled by the national debt. And I don't think I saw a statistic just this past week that the national debt represents $267,000 of liability for every man, woman, and child in the United States. Each one of us owe $267,000 to the debtors, the creditors to the United States. And we're going to spend more on the interest on the national debt than we will on national defense in the year ahead. And I'm very, very concerned, and I'm part of it, and I know, Sean, that you're a very active observer like I am, is I haven't heard either political party or any also competing like Robert F. Kennedy come up and say, you know what, folks, it's time to suck in the drawstring, dramatically cut a lot of government, and to really focus on having your first step is having a balanced budget. But here's the thing, Sean, if we have a balanced budget, the national debt stays the same. We need to have a surplus where that surplus is used to reduce the national debt, or this country will be in very, very bad shape in the future. And unfortunately, there's some really unkind people out there like Z in China and Putin and the folks over in Iran who are licking their chops saying, oh boy, if America, takes that big step off the curb, maybe we're going to have a chance to implement our interest in the world and how we see things being done. So this is I think one term that's overused in America is the term existential. We were told climate change is existential. We were told this, that, the other thing. But I think at this moment in America, the true existential threat is the national debt.
Well, I didn't know that I owed over $200,000. I don't know how they're going to get that for me. So let me ask you this: is a little bit of a pop quiz. There was something going on about our social security numbers being having some type of bank account. Is there any truth to that?
Well, there was, but it's been compromised. Basically, I've written an article that was published summer 23 in the American Thinker called Social Security, the World's Largest Ponzi Scheme. And of course, as you know, Ponzi scheme is designed where you never actually have a real investment. You pretend to be successful, and then you take money, and then you give a little bit of money to the early investors, and then you keep rolling, and then new investors say, oh my gosh, that guy made so much money, let me throw my money over here. Well, what happens is that of course, one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in history was Bernie Madoff, and Bernie Madoff ran up billions and billions of dollars. It's almost inconceivable how big his Ponzi scheme was, but it's Social Security is rigged that way. Think about it. When this was put into effect by FDR, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, the payout was at age 65. But if you go back to 1933, 35, and you look at the expected age, women were barely expected to live past 65, and most men were not expected to live past 65. So basically, what it was a hidden tax on the American people. It was like a complete across the board and what we would call a regressive income tax because it applied to everybody below a certain level, and the wealthy people only paid the same percentage as the rich people as the poor people. So what happened is that it was never properly funded. And unfortunately, the one person who actually understood this about 20 years ago was George W. Bush, the second President Bush, who I'm not a huge fan of him. He got a D minus in my book, but he did say we need to set up individual savings accounts and give people who are younger the chance to opt into a self-directed savings plan rather than just throwing your money into the kitty at the federal government and hoping that the federal government will have the money. So the infamous Social Security Trust Fund is really not there. The United States government borrowed that money. So what's happening is we presently still have the tail end of the baby boomers. I'm part of that, by the way, and I'm still working full time, so I'm paying into Social Security still. Is what's happening is Social Security can only pay what it collects and then borrow the difference from the United States government, which owes the money to Social Security. So when I mention the national debt, I actually use a bigger figure in my book, Decline of America, in the analysis I do near the end. And while the number at that time was $26 trillion, the real national debt is $100 trillion in 2018. But because what that does is it includes the retirement that we've promised to military retirees. My father has passed away, but he was a military retiree for 20 years after he left the military. That money is not funded. That comes out of current dollars. And then we have people who are on Social Security, who are collecting Medicare. Medicare collects less than it pays out, things like that. So, again, it's a bipartisan, or I prefer to say nonpartisan. This is not partisan. This doesn't matter whether you're whatever political party you are, is that we have to get realistic about the fact that if we want Social Security, and most Americans, it's a stunning statistic, most Americans are dependent on Social Security. Not, hey, it's nice to have it on top of my retirement account. It's, I have to have every penny of that Social Security. And they're talking in the year 2030, which is coming up fast,
Yeah.
that we'll actually have to cut benefits to match the smaller workforce relative to the large number of people, particularly baby boomers, who will be collecting Social Security. Very scary.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm your host, Darshan a.k.a. We're talking to Dr. David Schein. He's talking to us about his two books, The Decline of America, 100 Years of Leadership Failures, and Bad Deal for America. Dr. Schein, thank you so much for coming by Wild Podcast.
And Arshan, it has been a true pleasure. Thank you. And we've enjoyed every minute of it.
For sure. You have a good day.
You too. Take care.